its source, but quote, somewhere, somebody must have some sense. Men must see that force begets force, hate begets hate, toughness begets toughness. And it is all a descending spiral, ultimately ending in destruction for all and everybody. Somebody must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate and the chain of evil in the universe. And you do that by love. There's another reason why you should love your enemies. That is because hate distorts the personality of the hater. So if you needed, that's the end of the quote. So if you needed selfish motivation to hate your enemies, keep in mind that it is bad for you to keep hatred in your heart for a person. Don't hate people. Hate what they say, hate what they do, maybe hate what they stand for, but do your best to not hate the person. And if you're able, love the person. To, quote, to acquiesce and to give in, to resign yourself to the oppression. Some people do that. They discover the difficulties of the wilderness moving into the promised land, and they would rather go back to the despots of Egypt because it's difficult to get in the promised land. And so they resign themselves to the fate of oppression. They somehow acquiesce to this thing. But that, too, isn't the way, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. All right, so there you have it, listeners of the Andy's Philosophy Corner on the Steel Plaza podcast. Those, I thought, were some very powerful thoughts and words from a great American whose specialty specifically, I guess, was divinity. However, as I've mentioned previously on this podcast, since we've had historically a lot of crossover between the spiritual, the religious, and the philosophical, I think it's only helpful to include the words of Martin Luther King in this installment of Andy's Philosophy Corner. Now, as promised, okay, so this is halftime. So, Moby Dick, all right? It's been called the Great American Novel. And just recently, I watched I should have found the year on this. Oh, well. Gregory Peck as Captain Ahab in the movie Moby Dick. Gregory Peck is just amazing. The character, the personality, the performance, just the pure dedication to the role is amazing. Captain Ahab, captain of a whaling boat. Over the years, he encountered the white whale, Moby Dick. He was unable to bring down Moby Dick, and in fact, Moby Dick cost Captain Ahab his leg, the lower half of his leg, and Captain Ahab replaced it with whalebone instead of, wooden peg leg or something similar. And the deepest, darkest fire burns within Captain Ahab. He seeks revenge and nothing else. It's what drives him. He's purely obsessed with the hatred of Moby Dick. And in fact, he commits his crew to the destruction of Moby Dick. And Moby Dick is evil. And something, as you watch the film, and this sentiment just builds and builds and grows, and you have this growing sense of doom about Captain Ahab and about their mission. You have this growing sense of doom, all because Captain Ahab lost his leg. And what's fascinating about the story and about the movie is that about halfway through the movie, maybe 2/3, Captain Ahab's boat, the Pequod, they encounter another whaling boat. And so the captain of the other whaling boat comes aboard the Pequod, meets with Ahab, and the first thing this other captain does is he shows off his prosthetic arm. And the other captain's like, hey, would you look at this? There's this white whale, Moby Dick. Man, he's the reason I lost my arm here. You see, I lost my forearm here, and I replaced it with whalebone, and you know what? It's a blessing. So this other captain is telling this to Ahab, right? This other captain who, for intensive purposes, really had the same thing happen to him as Captain Ahab, but he reacted completely differently. This other captain would have been helpful if I had his name handy. This other captain, the exact same thing happened to him, and he's got a fine attitude about it, So, spoiler alert. They find Moby Dick. Captain Ahab gives it all he has, and the whale claims him. Or the sea claims Captain Ahab, whichever you prefer. So, I would say just if you are at all interested in film and classic American film based off of the great American novel, check out the film Moby Dick, which I'm wrapping it up here, but I would be incomplete without mentioning that Orson Welles has one brief scene in the movie, and Orson Welles is amazing. So I will leave the details of that to you, and I really encourage you to check out this great piece of American film based off of American literature. All right, the halftime show is over. Now, as promised, we're going to discuss and really just quote Mahatma Gandhi. And just before I head into the quotes and the biography, I wanted to mention that when I was 10, 11, maybe 12 years old, my parents encouraged me to watch the Ben Kingsley portrayal of Mahatma Gandhi in what was is a very long movie. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's over 3 hours in runtime. Perhaps the most amazing part of the movie, of the story, I should say. Gandhi is seated at the table of power in British-controlled India, seated there with the prime minister and all the generals and all of the other official bureaucrats that the British had controlling India there. Gandhi's saying, leave India. Very, very, very simple. And one of the generals says, or asks, you don't expect us to just get up and leave, do you? And Gandhi says, yes, eventually that's what you'll do. And he was right. The British voluntarily left India without a shot being fired. And here you had Gandhi, who never held an office. He had no military command. It was really just the determination of this little, 5'1", 120-pound guy. Just the power of his will. I found amazing and inspired, and I know I'm not the only one. And how did Gandhi do that? Well, it was with nonviolent means, which I won't get into any of those specifics on this podcast. But without further ado, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born the 2nd of October, 1869, and he was also assassinated, like Martin Luther King, assassinated on January 30th, 1948. He was commonly known as Mahatma Gandhi, which roughly translates into Great Soul. In India, he is generally regarded as Bapu, or Father, Jati Pitha, and Rashtra Pitha. He was an advocate and pioneer of non-violent social protest and direct action in the form he called Satyagraha. He led the struggle for India's independence from British colonial rule. He died the 30th of January as being shot dead by Nathuram Godse. Here, at this point, I'll begin quoting. Quote, "One thing we have endeavored to observe most scrupulously, namely, never to depart from the strictest facts in dealing with the difficult questions that have arisen during this year. We hope that we have used the utmost moderation possible under the circumstances. Facts we would always place before our readers, whether they are palatable or not, and it is by placing them constantly before the public in their nakedness that the misunderstanding between the two communities in South Africa can be removed." This was published in the India Opinion, October 1st, 1903. And just to take a brief step back, Gandhi, before he got the British kicked out of India, he fought apartheid in South Africa. Gandhi was an attorney, and he saw the oppression in South Africa, and this was really where he sort of cut his teeth and got people's attention before turning to his home country of India. Okay, this comes to us from Hind Swaraj, published 1909. Quote, "One of the objects of a newspaper is to understand popular feeling and to give expression to it. Another is to arouse among the people certain desirable sentiments. And the third is fearlessly to expose popular defects. In reality, there are as many religions as there are individuals. Religions are different roads converging to the same point. What does it matter that we take different roads so long as we reach the same goal? Wherein is the cause for quarreling? The English have taught us that we were not one nation before, and that it will require centuries before we become one nation. This is without foundation. We were one nation before they came to India. One thought inspired us. Our mode of life was the same. It was because we were one nation that they were able to establish one kingdom. Subsequently, they divided us. Civilization is that mode of conduct which points out to man the path of duty. Jumping now to the 1910s. Quote, victory attained by violence is tantamount to a defeat, for it is momentary. Good government is no substitute for self-government. A man is but the product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. As he wrote in Ethical Religion, 1922. 1924 from Young India, published March 23rd. Non-cooperation with evil is as much a duty as is cooperation with good. Written statement and trial Well, that's from its written statement in trial for sedition.